agency?
Yes,
Yeah,
I will.
yeah.
Our ride will come after 3.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
can
Oh,
you
you
hold on, Sue?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sue, for joining us also.
Thank you.
Bob, what's that beautiful background?
Well, I don't know. I found a picture. I'm going through a lot of stuff that's been stashed away for years. And as I sort through them, I ran across this picture. I think it might have been taken by me. I'm not sure, but it might have been taken down in Florida, looking across a lake there in one of the campgrounds I was in. I'm not sure where it came from, but it fits.
Good.
Nice.
And you're not advertising AUSCP any today.
Oh, yeah, you guys don't want to be paying attention to that all the time. There you go.
Well, we really don't need it.
Well, you have one, so I have to have a name.
Oh, yeah, but yeah, the name. No, I'm talking about the background with the logo.
Oh, you want that?
No,
No.
you don't have to sell me on it.
Yeah, you've been there.
I've been there. I'm in it.
You can make this a sub AUSCP group, you know?
Well, we could.
We could be an auxiliary.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting things that has unfolded for AUSCP, we have a mutual support committee that's been working for about a year now. And it developed out of a priest from up in Wisconsin who had been falsely accused and went through a really hard time of being cleared and all the rest of it. And so, he kind of contacted us. He is a member. And he said, can't AUSCP do something with regard to this? So one of the former vicars for clergy from up in Rochester, he's now retired, but he became the chair of the committee, and there's basically 6 of us that serve on the committee. And one of the guys is from Buffalo, where they've had a great problem with this, I think 8 guys that have put on a shelf and never gotten a resolution of they're guilty or they're not guilty, and all the rest. And he came across a card that the clergy in Ireland developed that every priest should put in their wallet and carry it with them, with basic guidance. If you're ever called into the bishop's office, never go by yourself and ask what the meeting is about. So anyway, we did that. We distributed it to all the guys that are members. So I think you got it.
I got one.
Yep, and probably maybe some of the others. And then we sent it out to, so first of all, it went to the leadership team. Then it went out to all the members. And we invited people to support sending it to all 33,000 priests in the country. And we asked them to make contributions to offset the costs. And they've done that. So we're going to be sending priests to all 33,000, the letter with the card to 33,000 priests listed in the Kennedy directory. So that's a really significant step for us.
That's
Yes, it is.
fantastic.
Good
Anyway,
for you.
one of the things-
Bob, can you send a copy of that? What's on the card?
yeah, I think I can have to dig it up. I mean, make a note here.
Or maybe Tom has it. He could send a copy of it to us.
I've got
Oh.
it somewhere. I know that
So one of the things was don't go alone to the meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of it. I keep thinking of Mar-a-Lago and Trump and people that go there like McCarthy, that's not the good thing to do. It's like going into the lion's den to have a neutral conversation.
Of course, McCarthy himself was never neutral.
That's not good strategy. Well, Tom, I was wondering if I could have a few minutes at the beginning to respond to some of the content of last week and a couple weeks about the synod and schism and so forth. I was going to send an email out, but I thought I'd just say a few things in person.
Is everybody in agreement?
I'm in agreement.
Why don't we pray? Would anybody like to tackle a prayer?
I was trying to find, Pope Francis has an album out. Did you know that?
Here's George.
Of speeches and songs, and there's a song in there. I was trying to find it on YouTube. Tom, maybe you could find it, but let's see if I can find the song here. It's called Wake Up, Go, Go, Forward. That's a title track.
While you're
Mhm.
looking for that, may I suggest Pope Francis's favorite devotion to Mary, the undoer of knots,
Yes.
and that I see myself accepting and promoting that devotion because we are surrounded by knots.
I think that's an excellent idea. Do you happen to have that handy? Or one of those prayers handy?
I don't, but just to have it in sort of like Bob's background, to have Mary the undoer of knots as a patroness for today. Pray for us.
Pray for us.
I have it in my book. The Untire of Knots. Let me see if I can find it.
Meanwhile, George, you're looking for what you need too, right? That song?
Yes.
Okay, well, meanwhile, I'm going to, here comes Ned. I'm going to move my messy room there to a picture that was drawn by a homeless man in Good Shepherd Parish. And I have that hanging on my wall here, next to
Oh, yeah.
Mary of the
Perpetual help?
no, Salus Populi Romani. But I
I've
think
got-
that homeless man did a very interesting and great job of capturing from a slightly different perspective. He was African American. The qualities of Mary,
Yeah.
the undoer of knots. But I can't hold up the camera that long. I've got to get back to setting it down here.
Yeah.
And you
I
don't
found
want to see
the,
me that close. Whoops.
I found the prayer, if you wanted, the St. Francis or Pope Francis for the Untire of Knots. And you can go on the internet and just put in Mary Untire of Knots. You'll get a whole sheets of images.
Right. Okay, now I've got myself under control. So would anybody like to read that?
You want the prayer now? Yes?
Go
The
ahead,
prayer
Bob.
to begin?
Yeah. Good. Well, let's just quiet for a few moments. Virgin Mary, Mother of fair love, Mother who never refuses to come to the aid of a child in need, Mother whose hands never cease to serve your beloved children because they are moved by the divine love and immense mercy that exists in your heart. Cast your compassionate eyes upon me and see the snarl of knots that exist in my life. You know very well how desperate I am, my pain, and how I am bound by these knots. Mary, Mother to whom God entrusted the undoing of the knots in the lives of his children, I entrust into your hands the ribbon of my life. No one, not even the evil one himself, can take it away from your precious care. In your hands, there is no knot that cannot be undone. Powerful Mother, by your grace and intercessory prayer power with your Son and my liberator, Jesus, take in your hands today this knot. And so we can pause and perhaps we can each identify a knot or two that has us tied up. I beg you to undo it, my knot, for the glory of God once for all. You are my hope, O my lady. You are the only consolation God gives me, the fortification of my feeble strength, the enrichment of my destitution, and with Christ, the freedom from my chains. Hear my plea. Keep me, guide me, protect me. Oh, safe refuge. Amen.
Amen.
And
Amen. Bob, did you say that was in your book?
Yes,
Which one?
this one. Jesus as priest for our time.
Priest, okay.
Yeah, I'll give you the, well, yeah, it's in there. It's toward the back. I'll find the page again here.
Okay, I'll find it. I have the because I like the wording of that much better than some of them that I've read.
Mhm. This is page 188 in my book.
Okay,
Tom, can you send it to us?
I will.
Thank you.
I'll do that today
I know you will.
because that gives me a good idea of something to be sent out and to send out in my email list for Mother's Day too.
good point.
So welcome,
George.
George. Welcome, Ned.
Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody.
And Ed,
Fred, welcome back.
Thank
I've,
you.
I've
Hi,
got to
George.
leave, I've got to leave at 10. or at 11. I'm sorry. Got to go to a practice or rehearsal for confirmation, which our oldest grandson will receive tomorrow.
Hmm.
Ned, are you involved?
I'm the
Doing-
sponsor.
Oh, sponsor, okay.
Yeah.
You
Well,
could probably give the homily too.
Probably good.
Who's the cell officiate, Ned?
I don't know. The bishop, I don't know.
And how
sure-
old,
I'm sorry. He's
how old
16.
is your grandson?
He's 16.
16.
Yeah, he's just starting to drive, and he's just an amazing little kid. He's trying to become a genius and, 15 hard steps. He's a sophomore and he's taking senior level classes and advanced placement classes and all kinds of stuff. And plays guitar like a classical guitarist, just wonderful. Very quiet. He's our oldest, and I'll send you a picture of him.
I'd like to suggest for today, there's a couple of things that we need to maybe pay attention to. One of which is, Frank, did you send your draft of a letter?
No,
to
I
everybody?
no, I sent it to you thinking that you might forward it because I didn't have everyone's.
Okay. Well, I'll,
My love letter to the parish,
Yeah.
as Tom called it last.
Uh,
And I changed it really completely because I was writing something like that was almost like a tutorial. I think I was being somewhat pretentious. I was writing like a pastoral letter.
you were
And,
writing like a university lecture, actually.
yeah. And so then,
oh, is that a bad thing?
so maybe I still did, but I changed the format to a kind, a more informal kind of letter because I'm going to be gone, and if they, anyway, I got over my pretensions.
Okay. Well, since everybody doesn't have it, let's not talk about it. I will get you some of my
Send
impressions.
it out for next time, Tom. I have time, so.
Okay.
Frank, without reading it, I had two thoughts.
Yep.
Kind of,
Well,
one was what
yes.
you wanted to convey as a pastor after your varied experience, and number two, what you've learned from the people, kind of like a, give and take type of thing, what you learned from them, what you've learned from them, and what you wanted to share with them as pastor.
Oh, gosh.
Well, I think both of those are in the draft, George. Because what I've learned, I guess, is, I was away for 40 years from ministry. Is that kind of analogous to marriage? I think the priesthood is consummated only when you're immersed in the lives of the people to whom you're sent, and they're immersed in your lives as well. It's a both and. Good for you. Yep. And so in fact, I had a debate with a sacramental theologian as to whether or not all the sacraments have something analogous to consummation in them. And so this notion of the ontological reality of priesthood as being a kind of a self-contained anointing rather than being something that opens you or whatever. So, well, we can get, that's a whole other debate. So
You're on the
that's,
right track.
yeah, that's the kind of, that, I experienced it graphically when I had open heart surgery, and I had very, very serious open heart surgery. I had a lot of stuff done.
Frank, when was this?
May of 2019.
Okay, just recently.
And, the support and everything, the way the parish came together was incredible. So that was a graphic, but it wasn't all sorts of other kind of things. So in a certain way, the parish makes your priesthood, if you will, your priesthood, if you can put that on it.
Yeah.
The parish makes it. And
Yeah.
it's a constricted reality if it's not seasoned with the interaction of people's hopes and joys and sorrows, and they're sharing actually in yours. So that
sounds like it's a co-created reality.
Right. And then the other thing is the parish as what I kind of call ecclesia in situ. That it's the whole church, the whole church isn't present in Sharon, but the church is wholly present in Sharon, if you will. And that kind of notion, etc. So anyway, that's.
Can I make just one blanket overall suggestion?
Yep.
Don't talk about the church in the third person.
Yeah. it's
Talk
true.
about you, the church.
Yeah, yeah.
This is what you have meant to
We.
me. This is
We,
who you
okay.
are.
yeah, you missed what, I was so upset last year when the Catholic appeal for the archdiocese, its slogan was, "This is our church."
Mhm.
It's a thing separate from you. And I said, it should be, we are the church, but you're right. I that's a good point. Thank you, Tom. It's my falling into the same.
Yeah, but you as pastor are actually writing to them as you.
Yeah,
Yeah, might be good to incorporate some we language there. We together are doing this, et cetera. But this is what you have meant to me.
right,
That's kind of what I meant by a love letter. In fact,
right. Well, I tried to touch on that as to what we have done together, what we have experienced together, which I kind of touched on in my comments.
But first, I think you want to make it clear that you as pastor are talking to them. So
right.
it has to be an I, you.
Right.
Before it can become a we.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
It does. That's good. I want to respect George Ferrick, who asked for some time.
Does everybody want to do that? I'll just say a few things that
Sure.
I was kind of tracking last.
Please do.
One was Tim talked about looking ahead 20 years. What would things be like? Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then the topic of synod came up, discussing the synod, and then some good stuff about that. You know, there was process and something that Pope Francis has wanted to do. And then Gary talked about, I guess maybe this was in relation to what Tim said, that there's perhaps an unofficial schism. Did he say that? Something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I wanted to share a few thoughts about synod. One is the word itself. I wish that there could be a different word for it instead of synod. Synod is a noun. It's kind of something that is technical. There's probably good reasons for it, but I was thinking of other types of things. I just throw these things off. One is in terms of a process, the word escuchando came to mind. Escuchandos, adelante, camino a futuro, a bridge. In other words, some word that would be more active than synod, because Frank, I think you were saying a lot of bishops it's something to check off. You know, it's just an item to check off. It's not, but the process, it's kind of like quantum physics. You know, you want to get things moving around and bumping into each other, kind of a listening and sharing and moving into the future. That's why I was interested in Pope Francis's title of this song, like "Wake Up, Go On, Go Forward." So that's just a thought. Another thing I found
Can
out.
I make a little comment on that? More
Sure.
active, because it just dawned on me. If we were living in late antiquity, which means, let's say, around the time of the Cappadocian Fathers down to the 5th or 6th century, synod would be a very active word, because that would be the word that we would use for walking together. You know, for us, it becomes a technical word that somebody has to define for us because it's not part of our vocabulary.
It
Right.
gets reified.
Yeah, it gets reified. Yeah.
But for somebody living in the 5th or 6th century, it would be who was natively speaking Greek, which most people were at that time. It would be a very active word, walking together.
Yeah. So something that would convey that, I think, you know, I'm thinking of millennials and Generation Z and people like that I think should be included in this and could be attracted to it. Anyway, that's just a thought. Here's another interesting thought. You know, somebody mentioned that letter that the bishops sent to the German bishops about the synod, right? The direction they were going in, and that there were no South American bishops as signatories to that letter. And it just struck me that I did a little bit of research. Fred and Frank, do you remember Dom Helder Camera
Yeah.
Yeah.
in Rome?
Very
That
well.
he walked down the aisle with the wooden staff,
Yeah.
and he was different from the others. He kind of was.
Ever.
I don't know if you could say something about him, but here's something I never knew about. But here's a little thing about him. It says he played a significant role in drafting Gaudium et Spes. It says on November 16th, 1965, a few days before the council ended, 40 bishops led by Camera met at night in the catacombs of Domitilia outside Rome. How's that for a plot? They celebrated the Eucharist and signed a document under the title of Pact of the Catacombs. In 13 points, they challenged their brother bishops to live lives of evangelical poverty without honorific titles, privileges, and worldly ostentation. They taught that the collegiality of the bishops finds its supreme evangelical realization in jointly serving the 2/3 of humanity who live in physical, cultural, and moral misery. They called for openness to all, no matter what their beliefs. I never heard about that. Did you,
Boy, that's
Frank?
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I heard about, he also spoke at the college when we were there one night.
Oh, did he?
During the council, you know, he stayed in a hospital and the nuns prepared the archbishop's suite. And when he got there, he said, well, I'm going to put somebody out of a bed. So why don't you just set up some screens and a bed in the hallway? And that's where he stayed for the council. And then he was very dramatic. He was a kind of a fiery little man.
Yeah, right.
He came to the college and he talked about, I think he was auxiliary bishop of Rio, and then was made Archbishop of Resenda and Olife, which is the poorest part of Brazil in the Northeast. And he told a story about how he arrived on the day that he was to take over as Archbishop. And he said, all these people were around, you know, very poorly dressed, some of the children half naked, etc. And he got out of his car and they had a red carpet and a gold brocade chair for him to sit in.
Here
He said, this isn't going to work.
in the section.
And so he said, as I'm walking up the red carpet, I'm trying to think of what to do. And so he said, a little boy came running over to me, half naked, poorly dressed. So I picked him up and I took him down and I put him on the chair and I said, I'm your new archbishop, but this is Christ the King.
You have a good memory, Frank. I don't remember that at all.
It impressed me so much.
Yeah, that's a great story. Jeez, yeah.
I've used it in homilies numerous
Uh-huh.
times.
And here's another question that when do you think Pope Francis was ordained? What year?
71 or
1969.
72, I think.
69.
69.
69. Wow.
So that's interesting. He was ordained after all of us, right a year
Oh,
after.
wow.
That's kind of
Wow.
The
interesting.
Jesuits do that.
What's that?
The
Yeah.
Jesuits do that.
They
You
do,
know,
yeah.
they have a lot of formation before ordination. You make your, what, I think you make your vows as a Jesuit, what, 4 years before you're ordained or something like that? I don't quite remember. Never having been one.
Tell me when.
No, that's true. That's
Come
true.
right now.
Well, it doesn't take her, it ends at 1:30 and it's 1:30.
Okay.
So then there's also part of Pope Francis' background must have been the Comunidades de Base of Leonardo Boff and Paulo
Fred, you
Freire.
have to,
Fred, you
No,
have
I'm
to
just
go?
moving to another room.
Oh, okay.
We have to hear the doorbell of our grandson,
Oh,
I-
okay. Great.
Luke Javier.
Luke
So the-
Javier, okay.
His father's from Spain.
Uh-huh. Well, look, it sounds kind of like you may have to leave fairly suddenly. So I just want to express, it is so good to see you. And it's so
Thank you
good to
very much.
see a little bit of Sue in the background. And dear Sue,
I'm like a shadow, Tom,
only a shadow, yeah.
if that.
But,
More
sure,
hint and
you
comment.
you are certainly in our prayers. You'll be in my prayers today.
Here.
And
Yeah.
hope that all of this will be easily cleared up.
Yeah.
What is, well, I'm sorry for being late, but what is this?
Oh, she has trouble swallowing
Oh,
But I'm not well anyway.
and she's not well in other ways too. She's had a long-term tinnitus.
Oh,
And
yeah.
her
Oh,
head
yeah.
runs down through her torso.
Ooh,
And the side effect, the chief side effect of it is it causes tremendous anxiety.
Oh,
So for example, she goes to classes with me because she becomes very anxious when she's alone. But she's wonderful in my classes. And in the small class, the kids really love her. So it's a nice thing.
how
And the
old?
grad students are very nice to her.
That's very nice. How old are the kids in class?
Oh, they're in their late teens
Oh,
and
okay.
early 20s.
Mhm. And does Sue kind of pitch in?
And the grad students are, probably mid-20s or pushing 30.
Yeah.
So Sue is mother for them.
In a way, she is, yes.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you that may not know it, at the Lonergan conferences that took place every June, Sue and Fred, you would do pizza parties. I don't know if it was for 200 people or for a smaller group, but
was a
Fred
lot
and
of
Sue
pizza.
Fred and Sue as a team were the hospitaliters of the whole thing, right? Kind of welcoming people and seeing them, making them feel at home, and then afterwards. So the two of you were like just arms out, welcoming and making people feel valued.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
May I was going to say this sometime later, but in June, the week of June 19th, we're going to have the Lonergan workshop. And I want to send to you what the theme of the workshop is and invite any of you who would like to participate. Online it'll be. You'd be very welcome to, according as you think about things you could help say on a very, very difficult topic. So look forward to that.
Good. Yeah, I was thinking of that and wondering if you were still doing it this year.
Yeah.
Thank
You
you.
are. Okay.
the
What
topic.
is the
Fred,
difficult
being-
topic?
It really has to do with the split in not only the nation, but also the church, which has reached the extreme of being unable to talk to each other. So no one will listen to the other side. And increasingly, more and more people hate people on whatever the other side is.
Mhm.
And for me, as I say in the thing that I'm going to send you, I love this quotation from the poet Hölderlin. He has this phrase in one of his long poems, "The conversation that we are." And if we're not a conversation, well, that's really the point of the sun hodos, the accompaniment, the talking and walking together that Tom was bringing out earlier. So I thought it was in line with that. And I know you guys have broad experience in many different contexts. And for example, I know George Ferrick has been doing mediating. So that's something he has a lot of experience in.
Yeah,
It just has to do with the practical insight into things that might be helpful in that context.
Hmm.
That's really the topic of the workshop.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds good. You're going to send that out to all of us, Fred?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I look forward to it because, yeah, wonderful.
is there a deadline for submitting if anybody wants to present anything or?
You should tell me sometime before June 19th. And it
about
doesn't have to be
June
anything
18th?
formal.
How about midnight,
Fred,
June 18th?
Is it 2
You're
days
not
or
in by
3
then,
days,
Sergeant
or
Sunk.
is it several days long? How will
Yes,
it go?
it lasts all week.
1 week.
And how do we get the pizza?
Okay.
Serve yourself and save. Key thing is save.
Yeah.
Eat it on camera.
Thank you for letting me.
Hi, Gary.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Gary.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Gary.
Good to see you.
I'd like to see you.
Yeah.
So I'll just say a few more things. Gary, I've been just saying a few things arising out of last week's conversation. And one of the things you said was that there's an unofficial schism.
Well, it just seems to make it easier for me to think that way.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about that, and it seems like maybe from times immemorial, people have picked and chosen what was most important to them in the facets of the church. And then they've sought out people who express that. Haven't some people always gone to this parish or that parish because of the liturgy, like you mentioned, the one in Oakland? You know, people would go there because it had a different spirit to it, so they were gravitated to it. Or maybe there was a Jesuit parish in the slums in Omaha, Nebraska, that a friend of mine went to because they liked the spirit of it and so forth. So maybe that's always existed throughout history. And I'm thinking of that the 40 bishops that Helder Camera called together that emphasized poverty. And if you compared them with the curial cardinals, right, there'd be a world of difference in terms of the type of ministry that they had or the spirit that. So maybe it goes all the way back to the wheat and the chaff. Not that we want to. That doesn't help dialogue to call people chaff. That wouldn't be good.
You can mediate that, George.
You know, my only thought, I mean, there's always been, I just read somewhere where everybody's a cafeteria Catholic. I mean, whether you're on one side or the other.
Right.
That is certainly true.
The thing that struck me was more that you see some bishops who are, I mean, openly against Pope Francis. I mean, it's more than just I disagree with him. There's just a current, it seems to me, within the official church, if you want to put it that way, or the episcopate, that it's a division that seems to be stronger than just that I disagree or something like that. That's what I meant. That's kind of what I
maybe.
And then people who follow that,
Yeah.
are part of that group. Like I think up at our cathedral, someone has told me that they sometimes speak against the Pope, and so it just strikes me. Our bishop has not done that, but I mean, it just makes it easier for me to say, there's no need for me to try to be in union with them. Or
Gary, you mean they speak against the Pope from the pulpit?
yeah, that's what I've heard. That they said we disagree. I don't know exactly what they said, or someone gave me that impression. Let me put it that way. And I don't know exactly what was said or anything else. But that's what I mean. I mean, that's all I'm saying. I mean, there is no real. I mean, it's not official. It just makes it easier for me to think that way without, you know what I mean? Without trying to figure out how you're going to unite people.
Well, in the Protestant churches, it seems like a lot of them, Baptist, Episcopal, Presbyterian, Methodist, that there's kind of like a progressive group, Lutherans, there's Missouri, American Lutheran, et cetera. They all have different wings of the church, of their own churches. And it seems like I can remember Daniel Berrigan and coming to the North American College. Is Frank here?
Yeah.
Frank, do you remember that? And Bob, I remember him talking about the Vietnam War, and he's saying, there's a line that goes through the middle of all churches. And he says, I feel more at home with Methodists on this side of the line than I do with Catholics on the other side of the line. You know what I mean? That he was saying that there's a different way of thinking about things that crosses all identifications. And that was true back then. And it's, I think maybe that's a perennial thing to deal with. I think the difference comes when somebody wants to establish a different institution, and they break away in some fashion.
Yeah.
And then it becomes, as you say, Gary, it's unofficial, but maybe it becomes official when people do that.
Yeah.
For example, there are Anglicans who disassociate from the Episcopal Church about certain doctrines because they're more Catholic in their beliefs.
Mhm.
I mean,
Doctrines or
I don't think it happens only at the high levels. I mean, sometimes you read documents that people are putting out or people are talking about, and they kind of drop incense into Pope Francis's Buddha and then go on and completely ignore him. Spend all their time quoting John Paul and Benedict XVI. So I think it's filtered down. I don't think it's only located with the high profile people like the bishops, but that it's finding expression in many different levels and ways in the church.
Uh-huh.
Well, one of the symptoms of that is the crowd that is associated with, and I sort of use that word crowd, recognizing that it has some negative connotations, some adversarial connotations, but there seems to be, let's say, the Word on Fire people, Bishop Barron, the people who are associated with Steubenville, the Franciscan University, and some of the very popular speakers, and I'm thinking of Jeff Cavins and the current little superstar that seems to be popping up all over the place, Father Mike Schmitz, and his Bible in a Year podcast, which I do enjoy. They are professedly very, very loyal to Pope Francis, but they rarely quote him. They quote John Paul II with reverence and admiration. They quote Benedict XVI with, how would I say, reverence and admiration and kind of
As if he was still
intellectual
Pope.
fealty. Yeah. I think they acknowledge that he's not Pope, but nonetheless, Francis is there, but and Francis is speaking and producing prolifically, and 90% of what he writes and says is totally aligned with both John Paul II and Benedict, and acknowledges that, but they don't seem to pay too much attention to that. They're constantly quoting these the predecessors, and that's a little problematic in my mind. Sort of as you were saying, or Frank was saying, I think they put incense in Pope Francis's Buddha, but then proceed to, having put incense there, they ignore him.
I wonder how much that has to do with covering their ass.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Because if they really do put the incense, then they could be thought of badly by a lot
Yeah.
of people.
Yeah,
Well,
we
there
have
is
to
another-
tell some people that it's not sweet smelling incense.
yeah.
could it be
Forgot about
that Francis is, in his presentation, less of a theologian or philosopher than Benedict and John Paul, and more of a pastor? Less scholarly, more, let's roll up our sleeves leaf or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah,
I'm saying that in hope. I have no idea.
He's much more gospel centered.
yeah. It kind of fits in, Gary, with what you said about the priesthood, you know, the active parish priest. I think that's what Francis is. He's more of a parish nitty gritty underground, you know, lived in an apartment and et cetera,
Yeah.
type of prelate than the others. You know, he didn't want to wear those red shoes, and he wears just his white cassock and so forth, kind of simplicity.
And very visibly black pants and underneath it.
Yeah, it looks. Yeah, one frustration I have, and there were a lot of things about John Paul I did not like, even while he was alive. There were a lot of things I did like. I mean, far more on balance that I liked. But you know, his stuff about women can't conceivably, no pun intended, be priests, and he was definitely pushing the church to the right in terms of these metaphors, you know, and I didn't agree with those. I didn't agree with him about birth control. I didn't agree with him about female ordination. I would think I have a host of examples at hand, but I don't. But I never mocked the man, or, you know, like some of these guys are doing. I mean, Strickland in Tyler, Texas, holy cow. The guy in Providence, Rhode Island, I can't think of his, Tobin. Tom
Tobin.
Yeah, I mean,
Redemptorist.
how dare he is kind of my reaction. How dare he? Nobody did that towards John Paul, who was more of an extremist than Francis is. I don't get it. I mean, I guess this is a cri de coeur. I mean, what gives them the license to be so public about their disagreements with Francis?
Well, George, don't you think it mirrors politics too, where people, you know, once there's a president in certain situations, an American would be behind the president, even though the person didn't vote for that president, but that's kind of gone out the window, and people feel no compunction about denigrating Biden, or, you know, it's the same things happening in politics.
Yeah, true. But well, it started that. Remember when Barack was giving, I think it was his first State of the Union speech to Congress, and this Yahoo from South Carolina yells out, "You lie,"
Right.
at the President of the United States during the State of the Union.
I remember that. Yeah. I remember hearing that. Yeah.
You know, I think that the separation in the minds of many between, and saying because Francis has a pastoral presentation, that he is not therefore in the same class as John Paul, for example, with respect to theological understanding is problematic. I don't think that's true. John Paul was kind of autocratic in his presentation, and very forceful. Francis has a little bit of that steel, but his major presentation is pastoral. But to suggest that what he's presenting is not deeply rooted in a theological understanding, I think is a mistake, and sets up Francis to be on the losing end of a comparison. And I think that's totally opposed to the whole notion of what charism in the church means.
Fred, how do you see that from your vantage point as a theology based?
Well, I think what I think Tom is right on. And I also think that part of the theological thing, which is fairly unique, is the discernment of spirits and the spiritual exercises that he takes extremely seriously. So he is really not only an evangelist, but he's also a mystic. But I agree completely. He's not innocent of theology or crazy about it or neglecting it. He just doesn't talk about it all the time.
Yeah, my impression, to put it in a nutshell, right from the start, it's been my impression that Francis approaches doctrine through pastoral care, and Benedict approached pastoral care through doctrine. Either one was opposed to either of them, but the emphasis was in different directions.
A couple of years after he became Pope, Dick McBrien gave a talk about how, whereas the former, oops, I'm sorry, I had to answer this. Go ahead. Hello? Yeah.
I'll mute him for the moment. And
Yeah, in line with this, can I just, this morning I woke up early and I started reading some of the news items about the Supreme Court, and this whole Roe versus Wade, et cetera thing, and the draft, Alito's draft being revealed and all that. And there were some Heather Cox Richardson and Hubble. Let me see if I can find that here, some quotes. But it seems like, when we were kids, before Kennedy was elected president, Catholics were thought of as kind of a out group. People were worried that if there were a Catholic president, he would export Catholicism into politics and policy. Now it seems like there's just a reverse. It seems like Catholicism. So Catholics welcome the freedom of being able to be Catholics. And now it seems like Catholics, if you take the members of the Supreme Court, things have flipped on their head. Now they're trying to make our country Catholic, so to speak. And here's a few quotes. Let me just put this out there that I copied this morning. Like Robert Hubble says, it is no longer a question. You know who Robert Hubble is? He's an attorney that sends out a daily kind of newsletter. He's a LA attorney.
George, could I quickly interrupt?
Sure.
Fred has come back on. Can you give us a progress report? Is there?
Great.
Do you need to go or?
Oh, no, not yet.
Okay.
Now we found out that besides Luke Javier coming home, an electrician is coming to fix some alarm in the hallway. So we have to open the door for him too.
Okay. Sorry, George.
Okay, so here's a couple quotes, and Heather Cox Richardson has one too. Here's some interesting things. I'll just talk about this. Okay, Rost Ross Douthat, is that how you pronounce his name?
Daltha.
Do
Alpha.
that, yeah.
He says, wait a minute, there's this dialogue going on with him and three others. Which Republicans outside of some traditionalist Catholic blog or something are saying that they want to pass a law banning contraception? And there are Catholics who argue that some forms of birth control are themselves abortion-causing medications. That's kind of taken out of context, but I'll just put out there. Here's what Heather Cox Richardson said: talk of ending gay marriage, recriminalizing homosexuality, undermining public schools, and so on, is animating the radical right. 3 Republican governors in New England, Charlie Baker, Massachusetts, Chris Sununu, New Hampshire, and Phil Scott, Vermont, have all said that they will protect abortion rights in their states. Heather Cox Richardson says, the world has changed since the Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade in 1973. Levi Strauss of Levi Jeans noted that today, 58% of its workforce is female. And as Rebecca Solnit pointed out in The Guardian, the various groups now under attack form a broad coalition. It doesn't really matter if they're coming for you because they're coming for us, she wrote. And us these days means pretty much everyone who's not a straight, white Christian man with right-wing politics. When I read that, I thought that could refer to the bishops. Straight,
Well,
white,
many of them.
maybe, yeah, many of them, all too many of them. Anyway, Robert Hubble says, it is no longer a question of whether Republicans will succeed in overruling Roe. It is how far they will go in criminalizing abortion, such as Louisiana is even going to say it's a homicide, after having stripped an existing constitutional right from women. Moreover, for the rationale for overruling Roe implicates several other significant rights based on the same privacy rights that underlie Roe: contraception, same-sex marriage, same-sex adoption, interracial marriage, and sexual relations between unmarried people. It seems like the Catholic agenda is being shoved on Americans.
Well, what
Whereas when
Catholic
we were
agenda?
kids, we were wanting to have our place at the table. Now we want to take over the table. We don't. I'm going to absent myself from the we because I've already done that. But I don't know. I just tossed this stuff out. It's what was going through my mind this morning, and as I was reading about what's going on.
Mm,
And it's
I
kind of
don't-
ironic that Trump appointed 3. Did he appoint 3 Catholics to the Supreme Court?
yes,
That's kind of very ironic.
2.5.
And it's kind of very ironic that
Gorsuch
Gorsuch is Episcopalian.
is he?
Gorsuch
Okay.
he was
is the half.
raised a Catholic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
Gorsuch
right.
was
Yeah.
raised a Catholic,
Yeah.
but he's
That's right.
Episcopalian.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so it sounds like in politics, we got I think you're right, Fred, that the theme of what's going on in politics and the church is pretty much a mirror image of each other. Don't you think?
Yes, although it's not the whole church by any means.
No, it
Just as
isn't.
it's not the whole.
No, it isn't. There is no whole church.
There are people in the center, but they
Yeah.
have difficulty speaking on either side.
Yeah.
What I think is happening is that, and this I think is Heather Cox Richardson often brings this up. I think that the Republican Party has decided that the best way for a nation to run is for the wealthy people to run it. And so they are just determined to take over everything. And I think that they have co-opted people of faith, the evangelicals, the Catholics, and I'm sure other groups as well. And they've taken over so many of the media instruments. Start with Fox News if you want.
Yeah.
That are promoting that program. and they've got people on a hook. They just, it's just amazing. Trump was up here a week ago before the election, a couple days before the election.
That's right. You're in Ohio. Yeah.
Yeah, he had a rally, and this JD, whatever his last name is.
Vance.
Yeah. And he was running, but he was not way ahead. Trump gives his talk, and they'll say, if Trump is for JD Vance, then I'm for JD Vance.
Yeah.
It's like he's got them mesmerized. And I think probably these wealthy people, not so much Trump necessarily as a guy that he just wants to be the center of it all. And I think the very wealthy guys that want to control everything, they should get more and more money because they can do more and more things and make things better and better and better for them. And they don't really care about the rest of the people is the way that I am getting what's going on. That's kind of my read. And unfortunately, a significant portion of the churches, because they pick one thing, such as the abortion question, and they use that to win over and over and over. Did I get cut off?
No.
No,
Okay, here's
we're
something.
with you.
Yeah, okay, I don't know where it went, but here it is. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of what I see happening. And I do think there is a reverse thing that is underway, but the Republicans have been working at this for a long time. For example, I forgot the guy's name, but he was when the president from down in Texas, I should
Rick
remember.
Perry?
Pardon?
Rick Perry?
No, the one that was he was the son of the other one that was the
Bush.
Bush.
Yeah.
Bush, oh yeah.
They had whoever was running his campaign was determined, and he was running the thing so that by 2015 Republicans would control everything. Period. He didn't succeed because Obama intruded, but then they went back and they got. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my read on it. And so we're in a fix.
Yeah.
That was Karl Rove, I think.
Yes, I think you got it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is this all started a long time ago. When Kennedy was running for president, 152 evangelical ministers put out a statement saying that Roman Catholicism was incompatible with American constitutional principles. And then over time, people like Weigel, Michael Novak, who started out, by the way, as a liberal around here in Boston, and H. Richard Newhouse, on the basis of social questions, did a reach out to evangelicals led by Charles Colson. And they began to put together a coalition of Catholics and evangelicals, in which the evangelicals kind of welcomed the Catholics along as fellow riders, but they're not completely comfortable with these folks. And then, as there's a recent book out by Maximo Borghese, who teaches in I forget Pisa or some northern Italian university, and he claims that Weigel and Novak and engineered this kind of interpretation of John Paul II's Centesimus Annus to make it sound like John Paul was all in on the American form of capitalism, and to make this kind of marriage between American capitalism and Catholic thinking, and to drive it in that direction. It seems to me there's a convergence between that and what Trump kind of brought to the political atmosphere, and that is getting rolled into one thing that's, I think, enormously dangerous. I mean, it's like Vladimir having Putin, having Kirill in his pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing they succeeded at overtly is, if I recall, is that John Paul was the first pope to explicitly list the market itself as having a role in determining social justice. The demands of the market are good, you know, kind of the unseen hand approach. And he, to some degree, in Centesimus Annus, bought into that. Not as much, I guess, as Weigel and Novak. What's his name?
Richard John
Newhouse.
Newhouse wanted, but more than anybody had before.
I always thought John Paul was kind of wary of getting sucked into either state. He obviously was opposed, given his experience in Poland, to a communist kind of thing, but Europeans understand socialism differently from communism, where Americans don't.
Yeah, right. We're going to get sucked into this abortion brouhaha. I mean, Ruth, what's the name of this outfit? Ruth Sent Us has posted the addresses of all the Supreme Court justices and is urging people to do walk-bys. And they're referring to the conservative ones as reactionary judges, and some sentence in that referred to Catholic fundamentalists, you know, who want to control your body. I mean, like, okay, Sonia Sotomayor? I don't think so. But
Now, that's kind of disturbing when they put down the addresses of people in politics and now in the Supreme Court justices. You know,
Well,
that's,
we got a notice from the Archdiocese yesterday that there's a group called Roots something.
Ruth Sent Us, yeah.
That is planning to picket and maybe
Exactly.
even enter Catholic churches this weekend.
That too, yeah. I read their thing. Stand up and protest and, you know, interrupt the sermons and all that. You know, Biden, strangely, you know, people talk about his problems with knowing what to say when and what not and so forth. I mean, he said something to this effect a few days ago. This is a terrible interference with people's right to choose and to decide if they want to abort their children, and should not be countenanced or tolerated. And he said that. I mean, and that's always been the pro-life, you know. If Ned were here, he would insist that the pro-choicers all get that abortion kills a living human being. They all understand that, he would say. I mean, he can speak for himself, and I suppose I should let him, but I mean, that's almost the pro-life fantasy, is that these people know what they're doing, you know, that will not face up to what an abortion truly is. There's a column in this morning's New York Times by a doctor who said she's been training, she's been doing first trimester abortions all along, but she realizes what's coming. And so she's learning how to do second trimester abortions because people who are in a state which will be utterly intolerant of abortions will ban them, and it'll take women in those states who are going to get abortions longer to get their act together financially and to travel to a state that'll permit the abortion. So there'll be a lot more second semester abortions. So she's been learning how to do those. She's moving to Oklahoma, which I never thought of as a state that would be at all tolerant of abortion. But in any event, she actually uses this terminology. Words to this effect: when I'm examining after performing an abortion, when I examined the pregnancy, comma, meaning what's left when she does the abortion, what the product of the abortion is. And she doesn't say the fetus, and she doesn't say the fetal remains. She calls it the pregnancy. You know, you're pregnant, and I've helped you become not pregnant. There's something wrong with that. It's just too Orwellian. Isn't there? I mean, do you guys agree with me?
No, I don't agree offhand.
You don't think that they should say? In
Well,
other words,
to me, pregnancy is a process word that's offhand. Yeah, I'd have to think about it some more, but to me, that's an interesting way of expressing it.
Yeah, I personally have to say, I do agree that, you know, we have dehumanized by terminology. In other words, you know, even the fact of referring to the unborn baby as a fetus, even up until the time of birth, you know, common sense has always told us that that is a baby. And mother,
I
yes,
don't agree with
yes, let's face it, mothers who want their baby will right from the start speak of what's in their womb as an unborn baby, as their baby. Mothers who don't want it may use other terms. But you know, when our popular culture refuses to say something other than fetus, which is a medical technical term for, or even product of conception or product of pregnancy, that is actually just dehumanizing what the reality is. The reality is, you know, that you do have a new distinct human individual there. You may not, you know, you can quibble about whether it's a person or not. And I personally would say, I think person's got to be a matter of development later on, but it is still human. It is still a distinct human.
I think it's human, Tom, but to call a 2-week zygote or embryo a baby that's propaganda as much as the other side calling it, you know, products of conception.
I
I think it's more nuanced than that, but that's okay.
I once asked Lonergan about this, and he said to insist on the absolute is not a good idea. People are always going to get abortions. So what should be done is to remove abortions from hospitals and make places where people can have safe abortions and not go back to the alleyways, but remove it from the hospital, which is a symbol of life. And so the thing is, if you outlaw it completely, you get into this awful thing of people having to think they have to have an abortion and doing so in a dangerous way, rather than having it be safe. So I thought that was what you might call a prudent approach.
Yeah. And the second thing on that, because I very much agree. The second thing on that is remove it from the realm of law, except insofar as the mother and what we would identify as a human person is needed to protect. In other words, to maintain civil order. Yes. Now, what is for the common good? That to my mind needs to be the point of discussion, not to impose a moral perspective, even if I happen to agree with it, not to impose that as the law of the land.
Right. Fred, you should find a woman and co-author an article about that. Seriously, I mean, I don't know what that would do with Lonergan's reputation, but
Oh, he wasn't worried
Was he
about-
speaking pastorally? Yeah,
Oh, of course.
yeah,
I mean, the thing is, when people find out that they're pregnant, they're happy about it. And I agree with Tom. I mean, with Tom, this Tom, that
Welbers.
that
I
that
think I'm the only Tom.
they believe they're going to have a baby.
Yeah.
And I think that's tremendously important.
yeah, but that's not a universal feeling, Fred.
Oh, I
If
understand.
if you have 10
What
kids
about all the
and your
people-
11th is coming in,
Yeah, I
and you've been-
understand that.
yeah, you know, or if you were raped and you find out you're pregnant, or
Oh,
Yeah.
you know,
I
it's not a
realize-
universally happy feeling.
Oh, I
Yeah, but-
realize that.
Yeah.
The exceptions don't make the rule, either,
Nevertheless,
George.
Yeah,
the common
Yeah.
sense view that you're going to have a baby
right.
is partly the unhappiness.
Yeah,
Because you don't think you're ready for a baby or whatever reason.
And you know, on the other side of the coin, for those who are seeking to have a baby, seeking to get pregnant and can't get pregnant, the fact they can't get pregnant is itself a tragedy
yes,
that they're unhappy about.
yeah.
Yeah, George, is there any stage of the pregnancy at which, if you were, you know, the philosopher king, you would restrict people's access to abortion? You know, would you favor abortions, you know, with 1 week remaining of gestation? Well, not would you favor them, if
Yeah,
you
no,
were the philosopher king, would you
Yeah,
permit them?
I guess where I am, whatever you want to call it, it's a being on the way to being a person. You know, whatever happens when the ovum and the sperm, it's different from anything else, right? It's on the way, it's in a process, right? The process has begun. So if you start labeling it at different points in time, you know, I would hope that nobody in my family would, you know, my granddaughter's 23. I would hope that she wouldn't have to have an abortion or wouldn't want to take, you know, want one. My stepson, who had 2 boys, 12 and 10, unexpectedly found that Lauren was pregnant. So now they have a 1.5-year-old. They didn't get an abortion. You know, they they had their baby, but they have a marriage. They're doing okay financially. You know, they have a loving family. And I think we have to look at that context. And that's why, to judge other people, if you don't walk in their shoes for 10 miles, you know, don't judge the person who's been raped or who's had, you know, I know a woman who's a therapist whose mother had how many kids? I don't know how many. Irish Catholic family. She ended up having, when she got married, she had 3 children like in 3 years, you know, and she left the church because she was pregnant at the same time her mother was pregnant again, because her Irish drunken husband made her pregnant again. And being a good Catholic, they didn't practice contraception. So there she is having a child while her mother's having a child, much older than her. So it's craziness, you know. And I think for every pregnancy, there's a man involved. Nothing is said about the men. Kathy Ryan, you know, who's been a guest on this, our group here, she says, where are the men? There's no talk about the men.
Well, but
It all is on the women, right? There's Amy Conway Barrett. Oh, go ahead and have the child and you know, and give it up for adoption, or, you know, I don't know. I just
well, you
think
remember we
that,
hassled
you know, to
all
have
this out.
white men order things for women, I'm just against it.
Well, but
There's a group bias there.
remember we went, I don't see that. Why is there? In other words, why is it such a terrible thing for a male who's, let's say, a Supreme Court judge to take a position on abortion?
No, I'm
He-
talking
he
about
takes-
I'm talking about the bishops and the Pope and the cardinals. That's who I'm talking about.
Well, you're going to disenfranchise
That's-
them? I mean,
No.
is it the question, what's a fetus or what's a embryo or what's well, no, that's a Catholic, that's a essentialist, Thomistic way of thinking, the question I just posed. I've never been able to see. Remember, we hassled this out before Frank and Bob got here, I think. And you and I were kind of at the left extreme of the group, and Ned was at the right, and everybody else clustered somewhere in between. I mean, I'm a pro-lifer with an asterisk. I don't know how else to call it, because I don't think my categories of thought work on abortion. My categories of thought would be, well, what's a fetus? What happens in an abortion? What's the consequence here? And that doesn't persuade anybody except me and Ned Chavira.
Well,
I don't know.
well, I think
but-
part of it, there's a confirmatory bias. I think one of you mentioned, if people are expecting to have a child, they're overjoyed to have one. If one is not expecting a child and it's interfering with their life, or comes from rape or incest, then they're not overjoyed at all, and they may call it something else because the context isn't there. There's not a loving couple. There's not maybe the economic background. Maybe there's not. It could be a 12-year-old, or whatever. I think we have to bring the context in the same way. The conversation about the Eucharist isn't just about. It's a community. It's relationships that are involved in this. So people will make that. But I think the basic thing is, why let Catholics as a Catholic determine what they want to do, but why foist it on other people? That's the basic thing I'm
what's the
concerned about.
nature of an abortion? That's the reason to foist it on other people, if there is such a reason.
Or
in traditional thinking, what's an abortion? If it takes the life of a human being, then that's a question for society to
Well,
debate.
what's a miscarriage?
Well,
Isn't that nature's abortion? Isn't
yes,
that an
it is.
abortion?
And I think that strongly weakens the pro-life argument. The fact that there are so many spontaneous abortions, say miscarriages.
Yeah.
Well, I think
And if-
that brings up a real question that does not seem to enter into the debate. If nature does something,
It's somebody.
to what extent can we, by human decision, do something? Recognizing that this new life is a distinct human life, and nature itself has its own criteria. If there's a defect or a deformity or whatever, chances are very, very good that fetus, will be miscarried, will be aborted at the time when miscarriages happen. And nature does that. Nature also very often fails to implant a fertilized ovum.
Mhm.
Nature does that. Now, a question really is, if nature can do it, why can't we do it? And under what circumstances should we perhaps say, yeah, it may not be the best thing, but it is a legitimate decision for particular circumstances, to do ourselves what nature very often does spontaneously.
Well, that figures in with assisted dying also.
It could very well.
Questions that it's natural for us all to die. When is it okay for us to help nature along?
Well, there
that's
is another question.
Yeah, it is.
Probably every
Yeah.
single one of us, in one way or another, has, well, let's put it this way: without the intervention of science and technology and medicine within that developments within the past 60, 70, 80 years, developments within our lifetime, most every one of us would be dead.
I would be.
I would be too. Obviously, Frank, with your open heart surgery, you would. Yeah. So we have already intervened in prolonging life beyond what nature seems to be intending. And that's an interesting thought. I'm not so sure that that would lead to a hard and fast, airtight conclusion. But it's often not really part of our conversation. If nature is doing something, are there circumstances under which perhaps we should be able to do it? Or are there circumstances under which we perhaps should imitate nature and not correct what is a natural process or intervene with the natural process?
Well,
Posing a question, I'm not making an answer.
yeah, here's another one. Are there anti-abortionist, pro-Putin supporters who are backing up killing mothers and children after they're born, fetuses, grown fetuses, and there was a wonderful cover of the New Yorker. Anybody get the New Yorker? There was a cover of a mother holding two children. You remember that? And in the background, there's a soldier. Do you remember? It's a cover from a few weeks ago. But
No,
there's
I
a
didn't see that cover.
Yeah, there's a Ukrainian mother kind of hugging two babies. And in the background, you see a military person who's actually a grown baby, right? The grown fetus is there as a military person who will be killing women and children. So all these things have to be factored in.
Yeah,
There's so many,
I do.
there's so many,
I'm not sure I see the point of that you're making with that picture.
well, the point I was making is somebody who will be anti-abortion could be pro-Putin, who is killing women and children willy-nilly and deliberately
Well, but
by
so
bombing
what?
hospitals and schools.
Well,
So someone, but that's, George,
Yeah.
I mean, people of pro-life, or pro-choice rather, haven't shown the same kind of energy proposing or supporting child tax credits, pre and postnatal care for poor women, a family leave.
That's right.
They haven't shown the same
You're
energy for
certainly
that.
No, they haven't.
So,
Yeah, they
so
haven't.
the argument can be made on both sides, it seems to me, that, you would think, for example, that people who would want a choice and would want poor women to have the choice, that they would also be the people who would be pouring total energy into making sure that these other things in the social system are there to support these poor women if they, in fact, they want to go forward with having their children.
Well, isn't that what the young progressive Democrats want to do? They want to put all kinds of money into those efforts.
But they're not on the street showing it.
Oh,
Anyway, here, I think this is the cover you're talking about.
oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that's
So
the cover.
it seems to me
Just
that
notice the
there's a
cover
whole
there.
need to broaden this whole discussion. I mean, you could argue, for example, that life doesn't begin at conception, it begins in the bedroom.
Sure.
And that, there are couples, for instance, who could tell you the particular embrace of love that resulted in a child.
Mhm.
And you can also argue, for example, like Pope Francis, it has this wonderful statement in the book on the universal call to holiness in today's world, in which he talks about we are passionately, in fact, I put it in my bulletin this week, we are passionately for human life, regardless of the state or stage of development. Then he says, equally sacred, however, are the lives of the poor, those already born, the destitute, etc.
Mhm.
So what the bishops, it seems to me, and what the argument has failed to do is enlarge it. It has narrowed it down to this thing of either or.
Yeah.
And therefore robbed actually the whole thing of the potential to enlarge the debate and the discussion so that in fact, we might be able to come, even though we're opposed to abortion, we might come to some kind of an agreement like what Lonergan is doing, if that's going to help
Yeah.
us do
Right.
away with the other extreme.
Well,
Yeah.
that was Cardinal Bernardin's leadership with his seamless garment ethic of life.
Yes,
Yes.
and you read John Paul II's encyclical, he, Evangelium Vitae, he argues for the seamless garment. He emphasizes abortion, which everybody picks up on, but he condemns capital punishment.
Punishment.
Condemns war. He is.
Well, but Francis has gone further.
Francis has gone further. That's true.
And Francis is a gesture man. So, for example, when he's in St. Peter's Square, he's kissing the man with elephantitis. When the Russians invade Ukraine as a head of state, he doesn't summon the Russian ambassador to the Vatican. He gets in his Fiat and drives over to the Russian embassy and tells them that's wrong.
Yep.
And that's a more effective type of teaching, it seems to me, and also a spur to expand the discussion away from this either or stuff into an engagement.
Yeah.
The first time we discussed this matter, when I was present, I thought George Crook made a beautiful giving an example of someone who might need to have an abortion. And in a certain sense, the way he put it is, how can you blame her, even though you think that abortion is wrong? And I thought, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh.
Oops, you're frozen, George.
Fred.
You're frozen, Fred.
Fred. Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, while Fred is unfreezing.
Come back, Fred.
Come back, Fred. Oh my goodness.
Well, Gary, what have you encountered in Bob on the parish front? What kind of people have come to you to deal with? Have you had people who are pregnant, struggling over whether to have a child, whether they were somebody just off the street to come in and talk to you, or in a marriage, or has that come up at all? Or do they just make up their decisions on their own? And Frank too, yeah.
It was very rare.
Very rare.
Yeah.
I don't recall.
Yeah, I had the same
A few
rarity. I think the main one that I'm trying to think whether I ever had a second one as such, but this was within the first couple of years of my ordination, and a young woman with her boyfriend, with their presumption that they're going to get married. I don't know if they ever did, but they were a regular family coming to Mass and all of that. Well, she came in and she was pregnant, and she really wanted to go to confession that she was going to be going up to have an abortion in one of the hospitals there in Youngstown. And so, she was asking me to give her absolution. I said, I can't do it before, you do something. And I encouraged her to weigh it further. Never saw her again. They were a musical family, and her sister later grew up and got married, and she married a Protestant pastor of some sort, and had beautiful children. And this is not the one that was looking for an abortion. I have no idea what happened to her. Her family might have thrown her out. I really never heard more. But in any case, out of that family came some really lovely people. My own struggle with this whole question, and I've done a lot of reading and a lot of study on it, is the idea of miscarriage, the idea of when a fertilized egg actually, it's going to begin to grow pretty quickly, but to say it's a person, I think that's a very slippery thing. Now, unfortunately, I think somehow or other, and I forget just what basically the argument is, that as soon as there's a pregnancy, you're dealing with a person. Well, my sense from my reading, it's anywhere from 20% to 40% or even more of pregnancies miscarriage. and I say to myself, so this is God who is bringing these new persons into being, like that, as soon as there's a fertilization of an egg. And I'm saying, this really doesn't sound like God creating persons when, half of them are going to be dead. So there's going to be the angels, that disappear. I think that's item one. Item two that bothers me is I think the ability of the woman to know herself in a way that nobody else can know her. And I think that some from the very beginning may say, I don't want to have a baby. I don't want it. They may not even call it a baby, whatever they do, however technically they're educated. And that can last all the way up to the end, that they don't want it. Now, should that be kept? So, this is probably not a sound kind of comparison. But if you have a cancerous development that's developing in your body, that somehow your body is generating this growth of a cancer, is that a living being, human being, in some sense? So you can go in and you can take that out, but if there's a pregnancy that's not desired, you can't go in and take it out. Then that's something that's not to be done, and they're trying to make it legal, make it even criminal. And so that can drive a woman crazy and can put them in a position that they know they're not going to be able to handle this. And so they look for some kind of an escape. Last night on PBS, they had, I think she's the head of I forget what it was. She's from Arkansas, and I think she was the Chief Justice of there. It was either that or she had some powerful position. And in the questioning that went back and forth, because Arkansas, they're going to, I think they're pretty firm already, but they're going to go absolute, never. So they started to ask, well, most of the people who look for an abortion are the poor and are the Black. And they are not in positions to be able to take care of a child or to take care of themselves or to pursue their own development to a point where they're going to be a more able adult person. So, the interviewer was asking her, because she was arguing, we can't have abortions, we just go for adoptions. So she asked her, well, how many children do you have waiting for an adoption in Arkansas? And she said 4,000.
Yeah, that's a very flawed argument.
Pardon?
It's a very flawed argument. That's the Amy Coney Barrett argument. Well, you can get an adoption,
Yeah, and these kids,
well, no, not really.
They're bringing all these kids into life, and nobody wants them. So and so they can talk the person into having the child, and they think that's better, but then the rest of the life of that child might be misery.
I think so.
So I'm really struggling with the whole doggone thing, and I really don't think it should be outlawed. I think that the ability of a person to follow their own conscience is principle, and I think that it should be help them. I think as a church we need to encourage them. I'm not sure how good our adoption of children is. I have no idea how well the Catholic Church is handling that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we
The
should
Catholic
look
Church
into that.
seems to be handling it in a very negative way. Gay couples can't adopt.
Yeah,
So there's a negative element to how the Catholic Church is handling adoption.
Well, and that's undergirded with a lie, as so many things are in this discussion. The church always says, No, every baby is entitled to a loving heterosexual parent combination, to a mother and a father that wants that child. Every kid is entitled to that. Great. Are they lined up at the door to adopt those children? No. You know, this to me is just such a hypocritical argument. We lost Fred, and he was in the middle of praising George Crook, and we lost him.
For more on the impact of this disclosure, both in
You know, Bob, what you said, you know, Bob, I really was on the edge, you know, listening to your comments and what you said about, you know, the miscarriages and what kind of God would that be and so forth. You know, I mean, this, you know, if I were arguing with an evangelical, I wouldn't do this, but I have this fantasy of saying, well, is God all powerful? Is God all knowing? If there's, you know, with the miscarriage where it doesn't come to term with an adult or a baby in this domain, the same thing with abortion. Could God implant that soul into another fetus? How would the person answer that question? In other words, to me, there's
I
a
think
certain
we
amount
have
of
to
mystery.
answer it. We
No,
have absolutely no idea.
To me, Bob, I think you touch on there's a mystery here. There's a certain, it's not a problem, it's a mystery. You know, it's a dilemma. This whole thing of life and what we talked about. Some people who are dying to have children can have children. Those who have children, like falling off a log, don't want to have any more. You know, you got all these situations. You have lesbian couples and gay couples that want to have children, and they, you know, it's just quite a scenario.
Yeah,
It's
just
messy.
real quickly, I want to add something to what Bob was saying. With all of these miscarriages and spontaneous abortions, our church, through all its 2,000 years, has never evolved a liturgy to mourn the death of these preborn humans.
That's right.
That just strikes. My ex-wife and I had a stillborn child, and I remember going up to a priest I did very well and saying, "Will you do the funeral?" And he said, "Guess what? There isn't a funeral. You can't have a funeral for that child."
George,
I'll
was that
go to
a
the-
third
Huh?
trimester?
No, right. I'm sorry, John. I'm not sure I heard your question.
Was it a third trimester?
Oh yeah, full term. And canon, whatever. There was just no provision for a liturgical recognition of a human being here.
Why not?
I
But
don't
there
know.
was there an effort to
I mean, if the
resuscitate?
church teaches that it's a life at conception, why do you need, anything additional?
I don't know. You
I
guys are
think
the priests.
I think the priest
I
was
don't
simply
know.
wrong.
No, I
Yeah,
think,
no.
Frank.
I
That's
know
Frank.
that from other sources that there's. I mean, it's forbidden, or it was anyway.
yes, it was. And I'm not sure it is still. I think in our diocese, they're having a mass, that's not for individuals, but I that's my sense too,
Mhm.
that the church never saw the need for a formal burial, a funeral burial of an early delivery, a miscarriage of a child. or
Child
something
not brought
like
to
that.
term, yeah.
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 And I think the other thing that rolls around in my mind as I try to struggle with this and get a position where I can, so this makes sense, is my understanding in the Jewish tradition, you don't have a person until a being is born and breathes.
Mm-hmm.
Without the breath, they do not have a living human being.
Makes sense. There's a joke. A Jewish friend of mine doing, when does a fetus become a lawyer in the Jewish faith? When he or she graduates from medical school or law school. Right, your fellow townies over there would.
Yeah, I'll have to try that out on some of them. We got 45% Jewish in this town.
It's a tough thing to weigh.
Right.
And I do think that what is developing, it is a violation of human persons able to make decisions about themselves. And, you know, for our Catholics, I think we have a value that we want to encourage in our people. But when the dialogue with an individual who's struggling whether to have an abortion or not, I think we can share our Catholic perspective, but they have to be respected when they leave with whatever they decide they feel they need to do as a child of God. And I think, you know,
I wish Ned were here. I really do. This would be a much more animated discussion.
You know, I just ran across the Office of Worship for the Diocese, I think, of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Here has a liturgy, liturgical resources for funeral rites for after miscarriage or stillbirth.
Really?
Yeah, I just pressed the send button to all of you.
Thank
You know,
you.
I was looking up when you were talking
Oh, Gary, could you speak a little louder?
yeah, George, when you said that the priest said there's nothing, I mean, the Catholic funeral rite has a liturgy for an unbaptized child. I mean,
Yeah.
it's in the funeral rite. That would be, I mean, you're talking the situation that you had, that was a priest just deciding not to do it.
No, because I researched it and it just wasn't there.
But he could easily have had a mass.
Yeah.
Well,
That
he came to
that was
the
a
grave.
pastoral lapse on his side, I think.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree that-
He came to the grave site and led prayers, but but he made it clear he was, you know, freelancing, so to speak. And he was a good guy. Now the long deceased, Italian Salesian. But certainly the fact that the foremost opponent of abortion never evolved or adopted a liturgy to deal with miscarriages cuts against the argument the church makes, it seems to me, big time.
Well, it certainly is flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no consistency here on any side in the abortion debate. I don't think there's no real consistency.
George, that might be the most wise statement any of us have made so far. There's simply no consistency on either side.
Yeah.
There's gaps and pitfalls everywhere. For example, this whole notion about the high percentage of women of lower socioeconomic status, and that the wealthy women in America are making abortion available for their benefit. That leaves us open. I had a friend recently who told me, you know, we don't want the people who shouldn't be having children to have children.
Oh, Ginsburg said that.
And I say to that,
Yeah, what?
there is no evidence that people's socioeconomic, well, I shouldn't say there is no evidence, but I know a lot of people of low socioeconomic status who raise beautiful children.
Right.
And
That
so
goes
I
back
think we
to
need to
my-
walk, that's another minefield that we need to, there's a lot of eggshells that we need to avoid when we're walking through that.
Yeah, that goes back to Margaret Sanger at the early days of Planned Parenthood. I mean, she was just a straight out eugenicist.
But like, that's another one of the things that you're saying, George, about, you know, you can be driving an argument one way and then all of a sudden say, uh-oh.
Yeah, it's
Bob, the interesting thing in your story about is that, you know, that family never came back to church.
The daughter, the son and the sister, you know, came back. So they
Okay,
had two girls. And I think I'm not remembering that the mother was still alive. I'm not remembering that. But the one that came in and wanted to get absolution before she went up and had her abortion, she's the
Mhm.
one that never showed up again.
so she probably went to an evangelical church.
Well, I don't know whether
Or
she-
none.
yeah.
She might have found another priest, but that my experience, and it's much less than Bob's or Tom's, is that people come to you after they've had an abortion, not before.
Yeah, mostly.
I had a few experiences where, you know, a girl would be pregnant and she was considering abortion. I mean, George, you asked it. I said it's rare, but I've had a few, and I've always, or someone from the family will say, "What are we going to do?" Someone, you know, our daughter has pregnant, and what are we going to do? You know, you have to leave it up to them in the end, but you've got to also tell them, you know, what the church believes and why. And one of the things that I discovered, and I did not know this, there's a program called Project Rachel.
Mhm.
It's for, you know, for people who've had abortions, who then later on experience this incredible deep angst. And I know one person who was I just at a one day kind of training workshop about that. I never got involved in the program, but I remember the person saying, you know, that person needs to be able to grieve over that lost child in order to kind of come to some sort of, you know, peace within themselves to say, you know, so there's something inherent in the act for, especially for a woman who is, you know, who, I mean, it's in the nature of things to give a life. And then when you sweep that away, in the end, down the line, somewhere along the line, you set yourself up for that kind of suffering. At any rate, like you, I've always told people, you know, this is what we believe. I cannot counsel this. I hope that you can find another alternative, you know, that would allow you to bring a child to life for that child's sake and for your own sake, you know. But in the end, they have to make that decision. But it's
Well, plus I would imagine, Jerry, pastorally, you're thinking, gosh, if I make a real strong argument against abortion, chances are that the young lady is still going to have it,
yeah,
because of all the life stressors that are propelling her in that direction.
Yeah.
And then what have I as a priest done? You know, created guilt that could torment her all her life long. Is that a good thing? Is that what Jesus would do?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, George. I was thinking of that too, because people will go to Project Rachel if 20 years earlier there's this big finger pointing at them, right, with a priest on the other end or something saying, yeah, that's a mortal sin.
I don't
Where
know.
they're gonna go.
It all depends on whether or not their guilt comes from because they broke a rule or because
Right.
they did something that's so inherently contrary to their nature as they grow to become more aware of what really happened because of it.
I had
Well, I
an
think-
encounter with the Project Rachel woman when I was in the seminary. My most recent go around in the seminary, you know, the start of my second shift, as I call it. And we had a training session with Project Rachel. And of course, at that point in time, I was probably a year or a little bit more away from the death of my wife. So I was still in a fairly close grieving kind of situation. And I remember linking up with this woman and sharing grief with her. And I did not get the sense that she was grieving because she was overwhelmed by the fact that she'd done something wrong. I got the sense that she was grieving because she understood what I was talking about when we talked about loss.
Yes, exactly.
And I think there's a real difference there, actually. And one, you know, if we get someone, if a woman comes to us in that kind of situation, you know, we really need to be sensitive to that and not presume that she's coming in and she's just upset because someone pointed a finger at her. And even though that may be true, but the deeper thing she may be talking about is just the whole sense of loss, of deep loss.
Yeah.
The lady that started Project Rachel, she was from Marquette. And her husband, I think, was a professor up there, if I recall. She died just recently. But that has found to be a very good program. And you know, I think that the other experience I had, I was down in Washington for a spell, and I was at a parish, and then they needed to take the room that I was in, and somebody in the parish said, well, come on over to our house. This was a former CIA guy, military guy, and his wife, and it was just the two of them. They had a nice home, and they said, come on over and live here. And I had a nice room upstairs and all the rest of it. Well, so then right next door to them was this younger family with 4 children. And, you know, there was, I think the other guy, he was from Boston. The husband was from Boston, might have been from Boston College, but they were Catholic. They were good practicing Catholics. And, you know, along the line, I discovered that the mother actually told me, and this was in confession, so it's confidential in terms of whoever it was, you know, that she had had an abortion when she was in her teens. Her father was very much connected with one of the big airplane companies that created all the big airplanes. So it was a wealthy kind of situation. So she got pregnant. She had an abortion, and you know it was. But she was not a terribly unhappy person. Yeah, these 4 beautiful kids. I you know, once I left there, I haven't kept any ongoing connection with them. But you know, I think that it was probably parental pressure, is my sense. But I think, you know, that the stance the church has to make, and I think from my point of view, where I am at this point, I think our government cannot restrict people's ability to do with themselves, with their bodies, what they need to do to stay whole, to put it that way. And so I'm very much opposed to destroying this law. That's kind of where I am at this point in it. The church should not be encouraging abortions. I think we should be counseling people and helping them come to a mature decision with which they can live, and to help them to be able to feel that they have made a responsible, conscientious decision, and it's the best decision they can make, and we have to respect them for that. So take a parish. I'm not a pastor anymore. I'm not going to be, I'm 81 at this point. But if you had, you know, somebody, even if it's a married woman who comes in, but somehow or other, you know, the word gets out that she's had an abortion, let's say, the parish needs to embrace her.
Mm-hmm.
And the priests need to embrace her and help her know that she's loved by God. And I think with what the government is tending to do, and specifically about half the parishes, I think they're just becoming brutal. We're in charge. We'll tell you what you need to do. And if you don't follow what we think needs to be done, we're going to put you in jail. You're going to be a criminal. It's just terrible.
That's why, you know, I've never really, to be honest with you, I never always understood all the issues, you know, around Roe versus Wade and everything else. But and George Crook, particularly being a lawyer, you guys would know a lot more about all this, you know, and the idea of Biden being, not for abortion, but for, how you call it, pro-choice or whatever his stance is. This, if they do away with Roe versus Wade, and all the things you've said today, it just strikes me, there's a difference between something being immoral and something being illegal.
Absolutely.
I agree with you, Bob. I mean, I'm beginning to think more and more now that, maybe we should leave, just not make it illegal for people in any state. I mean, but it's not a question of morality or immorality. It's a question of really somehow how doing the best for the common good. I mean, when you're living in a pluralistic world.
Mhm.
I have to read the article. I get America Online. I get too many magazines. I don't know what to do with them. So it's better to have them online, although I don't read them all the time. But I saw it just came across either yesterday or this morning. I haven't had the chance to read it. But a woman who writes this saying, I have always been pro-life and always hoping for the end of Roe versus Wade. But now that it's happening, I don't feel so great. And I'd like to know what her reasoning will be. I'll read the article.
Sounds like a good read. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll take a look at that. But
I had a very similar
Yeah,
experience.
I'll be finished. Yeah. Yeah, I've got to go now.
No, you don't.
Hi, George.
No, I will.
Before you go,
Oh,
George,
my.
thanks for this conversation. It's very stimulating. It really tweaks your mind. It's wonderful to have to be challenged to think like this. So thank you.
Has been. Thank you, George. God bless.
Yes.
Thanks.
Take care.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I won't be
everybody.
here. I won't be here next Friday. I have to go to, I'm going to a graduation of my step grandson up
Okay.
in Oregon.
Dr.
So,
Welbers recording, so you'll get
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
benefit.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks all.
Well,
Bye, George. Before we go, Johnny, what's the state of your health? How are you?
I'm still making small steps. The next piece for me is physical therapy to make sure that I'm progressing. The doctor this week on the subject of driving validated what my family and I have discussed, and that is I'll take some small steps with somebody in the car with me, giving feedback how safe. I'm clearly more of a listener than a talker these days. And I value your recording so that I can go back and reflect. So thanks for asking. Small steps, making progress, and optimistic. Thank you.
Where are you right now? Are you in the desert or in Irvine?
No, I'm in Irvine. I just shifted to another part of my place because I like that picture and the lighting. So yeah, it's just I'm not in my recliner like I have been in days past.
Speaking of health, I wasn't going to bring this up, but I will. Something's going on with me of interest to the medical profession, to the degree that 2 weeks from now, roughly, I'm going to have a bone marrow, what do you call it, biopsy. And I have a chronic condition called hemochromatosis, whereby my body doesn't eliminate iron. And it typically kicks in around age 45, which it did with me.
Just the opposite of iron deficiency, huh?
Yes, the opposite of anemia. And the iron will pile up in one's vital organs, and most especially the liver, and you die from that.
I'll be darned.
And the way they control it is they take out blood every X weeks, as if you were donating to the Red Cross, and and your body makes new blood, and in so doing leaches iron out of your organs, and you stay alive. But now I still have that condition, but suddenly I've become anemic, and that's and that is throwing the Peter Sinai mafia, whose altar I eagerly worship. My hematologist, blood doctor, I call him my vampire, called me up yesterday to give me some preliminary test results. And a wonderful guy. And I said, well, Barry, don't give me no bad news. The first words out of my mouth. And he said, okay, George, nice to talk to you. Give me a call someday. I said, oh, good, Barry. What have you got to report? The report is, we don't know what's going on with you, dude. But he said, whatever it is treatable. So thank God. So keep me in your prayers. Please.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've got confidence that you're in very good hands.
Well, I do. I mean, these guys, I've been, I don't know how many. I'm like Fred. Fred said he had a team of doctors. I have a team of doctors, and they're all top of the line, and it's an excellent hospital, and etc. So we'll see.
Good. Prayers go with you.
Prayers for all of
I
you.
very much look forward to reading the draft that Tom has.
Okay.
And
Thank
the
you, John.
dynamics.
John, you asked about it, and so I want you to read it above all. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
I
sent
sent out
the
that-
original draft to all of you, but Frank, you've got a new one, right? That you haven't sent us yet.
No, the one I sent you is the last one,
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay,
the last,
good.
it's the Alito draft.
Okay.
And I sent that card for the mutual support of priests who have been accused and the letter. Everybody should have it. I'm not sure it's the latest edit, but it's fundamentally the same. So hopefully
Bravo.
you find that of use.
Okay.
Yep.
Very, very
Take
good.
care, guys. I gotta run.
Okay.
All right. God bless you all.
Pleasure.
And I'm gonna
Thank you all.
press the end button here. So
Thank you so much.
take
God
care.
bless. Bye-bye.
Bless you all.